Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we're diving into a topic that makes many of us living gluten-free make mistakes. Hidden gluten in everyday foods. Whether you're new to gluten-free living or a seasoned pro, some sneaky ingredients can catch anyone off guard. Hi, my name is Ashley and I've been gluten-free for over 13 years after I was diagnosed with celiac disease. This hasn't stopped me at all. I've visited over 18 countries and even moved across the world while being gluten-free. Even though I've traveled a lot and have been a celiac for a number of years, there's always certain ingredients in certain products I look out for to see if they have gluten in them. Let's dive right into it. So the first thing are sauces: soy sauce, teriyaki sauce, fish sauce. All these sauces contain gluten, so you'll need their gluten-free versions. Here I've got gluten-free soy sauce and gluten-free fish sauce. These are specifically gluten-free. These sauces normally contain wheat in them. That's why you need special versions of them. So there is this gluten-free soy sauce, but there's also a tamari sauce in other brands. I suggest going to Asian markets and having a look. Sometimes they have like a gluten-free sauce section, or sometimes you just find it sprinkled around. This is an oyster sauce, which is quite good, and this is also gluten-free. The other sauce you have to be careful with is, I'm going to see if I can pronounce this, Worcestershire sauce. So this sauce usually contains malt vinegar, which malt we can't have. Malt comes from barley. So you have to have a specifically gluten-free version of it for it to be safe. Number 2 is barbecue sauce and ketchup. These are products that can have gluten in them, so look for gluten-free versions of these. The third type of product I am careful with are these coffee syrups. So coffee syrups can sometimes have wheat, barley, or some gluten-containing ingredients, so talk to the person in the coffee shop or your barista to see if it has it in them. You have to be very careful with this. Also, as a side note, in the coffee shop, be careful if they're using the same steamer or the same jug with plant-based milks that have gluten in them, because it could be a source of cross-contact. So just be aware. Another product to be careful with are cornflakes. Why? If they're corn flakes, why should be careful with? So usually cornflakes have corn in them, but they do contain wheat or other ingredients. So here I've got gluten-free cornflakes. These are gluten-free. It says they're in Italian. I got them at an Italian supermarket. Honestly, they're the same as the rest of them, but they are a good alternative, and just be aware that cornflakes are not always 100% corn. Look for 100% corn versions or versions that have a gluten-free stamp on them. Another one that you might know of, but it's always good to mention, are French fries. So French fries are made from potatoes, but there are two things you should be aware of. One is the coating that they put them in, or if they're industrially made, then they could add something in them to make them more soft or crunchy. And that could be something from wheat, barley, or something that has gluten in them. So that's one thing to be aware of. And the second thing to be aware of is if they are fried in a dedicated fryer. What this means is you have to make sure that nothing containing gluten touches the oil that the French fries are being fried in. For example, if they're frying onion rings in the same oil and the onion rings contain gluten, the coating of the onion ring has flour in it, and those pieces of flour can come off, go into the oil, contaminate the oil, and your French fries are going to go into the same oil, touch it, and could have particles of gluten on them, and that can make you sick. So it's best to be safe and for them to be fried in a dedicated fryer, which means simply that only French fries that are gluten-free are fried in that oil. So this is an interesting one. It's not a food, but it is a product that could be in your kitchen or in your house that could contain gluten. This I learned a few weeks ago and I was impressed. It's the Scrub Daddy Dump duster. So this is like a sponge that picks up dust, and it has gluten in it to grab the dust better or something. It's wheat starch. So for many celiacs, it's not a problem to touch gluten. Obviously, you're not going to eat this sponge, but it could come in contact with surfaces that do come in contact with food, or it comes in contact with your hands. You don't wash your hands very well, and then for some reason you touch something, you put your hands in your mouth or something like this, and you are glutened. So be aware. If you have a skin reaction to gluten, then by all means, don't use it. The 7th product I'm going to talk about are salad dressings. Usually all these like sauce-like products could contain gluten until proven otherwise. A lot of them are gluten-free, but a lot of them do contain gluten. So just be aware that these salad dressings could contain it and look for gluten-free options. Another one that could be in your kitchen and could be a staple in your kitchen are spices. So spices, sometimes the volume is increased with gluten-containing products, or there could be processed in a place where gluten is also processed. So just be aware. And then also talking about the spices, in some houses, there is this bowl with salt in it, and everyone like grabs a pinch of salt and puts it on the food, or with a spoon puts it on the food. That could be a source of gluten. Just because imagine you're making bread, you're touching the dough and it has flour in it, then you put your hand into this bowl, get some salt, sprinkle the salt, but the particles of flour that were on your fingers went into that bowl, and then you prepare your gluten-free meal, take a spoonful or a pinch of salt from there without knowing it has flour in it. So I always feel that if your kitchen is not 100% gluten-free, it's better to have a salt shaker, a pepper shaker, and nothing that you would really put your hands in, just as a side note. So another thing to be careful is one of my favorites. Salt and vinegar chips can be found in gluten-free versions, but a lot of them are not gluten-free simply because they're made from malt vinegar. Again, this comes from barley, so it's not safe, just so you're aware. And this also applies to a lot of the chips that are sold out there with flavoring. So be careful, look at the list of ingredients, and hopefully find one that are gluten-free. So the 10th thing that you have to be aware of is processed meats, meaning ham, salami, sausages, pastrami, all this kind of group of foods. Usually the normal recipes don't contain gluten, but as we are in a industrialized food processed world, they could contain it. So always look at the ingredients, watch out for wheat, barley, and different gluten-containing ingredients, and just be aware. There are gluten-free versions of these, but just be careful. Did you know that gluten can hide in broths and stocks? It's usually used as a stabilizer and thickener. When in doubt, just opt for a gluten-free brand. So usually this happens with store-bought or stocks in restaurants. So look for specifically gluten-free labeled broths in the jars. And this also applies to the powders. The powders usually, or these cubes, usually have gluten in them. So look for gluten-free options. I'm going to leave a couple of pictures here of some gluten-free options. And in restaurants, I'm always careful with risotto because risotto is made with broth, and the broth could contain gluten. So I always ask if the broth contains flour or wheat in it or gluten in it. So just so you are aware. If I'm making it at home, obviously I don't use a broth that contains gluten, but this is if I'm eating out. Another one, which I don't consume, but I know from just looking at it and from friends that are vegan, is the vegan meats. Usually they have gluten in them to make like a meat-like texture. I'm not sure if you've seen these videos on Instagram, but they make like a vegan chicken, and that vegan chicken is made completely from gluten. Yeah, not flour, but just complete gluten. It's like our kryptonite. So these vegan meats have to have the label of gluten-free. That probably reduces the options, but just be careful. As I mentioned before, in the coffee syrup section, you have to be careful with plant-based drinks because some of them have additives in them that contain gluten as stabilizers and thickeners, especially this with the oat drinks. So it has to be made with gluten-free oats, and this is if you can tolerate gluten-free oats. Just check the list of ingredients and hopefully find a gluten-free plant-based milk. This applies to almond, soy, to oat milk, just all these plant-based milks. We're getting to the final 3. This is also an interesting one, very specific. Bacon at hotel buffets. Why, you might ask yourselves? Have you ever seen these like silver serving trays that have a cover on them? So what they do is they make a big batch of bacon, and bacon is super oily. So what they do is they put a bed, literally a bed of bread in it. And then on top, they put the bacon, which means that the bread will absorb all the fat that's coming out from the bacon, but it contaminates it. So always be careful when being in a hotel buffet, but also be aware of the bacon. If you really want bacon, if you really want eggs, ask the staff if they can make some bacon on the side for you without touching the bread. Another one that reduces a lot of the options out in the market are protein bars and protein powders. I don't really like protein bars and protein powders. I buy some protein shakes and yogurt, but there's a lot of options on the market that have some kind of gluten-containing ingredient in it. So always check, do your research, and look to see if the protein powder or protein bars you're having are gluten-free. The last one I want to talk about is something that almost always contains gluten, and it's for your sushi lovers. I'm really sorry, but imitation crab almost always contains gluten. So be careful. If you like this product, you'll have to find a version of it that is gluten-free, which is difficult. But please be aware and don't get glutened with this product. So this was a short one, but packed full of information. Hidden gluten can be really tricky, but once you know where to look for it, you can avoid these unpleasant surprises. If you found this helpful, give this video a thumbs up and consider following me to see more videos in the future. If you need help with your gluten-free travel plans or anything related to gluten-free, click the link in the description below to book a free call with me. I'm happy to help you. Thanks for watching this video, and see you next time.